I'm so interested in reading the article that may or may not have existed, which is about quote unquote dark tourism. You talk about the trip you take to Cambodia.
Hmm.
And I mean, you talk about, again, there's no words that can absolutely describe the breathtaking nature of the violence. I mean, 1/4 of the people of Cambodians were killed in the killing fields in the late 70s and Pol Pot and all of that. I mean, how do you even, when you talk about the Holocaust, I mean, the numbers are just astronomical, right?
Yeah.
And so you went there with yeah, that really interesting idea about really investigating dark tourism and what draws people to museums. And um there's the Museum of Tolerance, and there are two of them, or Holocaust Museum in the United States. That's not what you write about, and those are different. But people go. I've been, and there are a lot of there's a lot of education involved. But when you talk about in Cambodia, I mean, these are the killing fields. These are, you're seeing blood and brain matter, from
Yeah.
kids on the trees.
Yeah.
What drew you to Cambodia? Did you, and I mentioned in how you write about the, like, kind of like the commodification of torture, the commodification of tragedy,
Yeah.
and also if you can weave in the his name is slipping my mind, but that great tuk tuk or taxi driver that you met there.
Yeah. Chetra. Yeah. Chetra the tuk
Oh,
tuk
pardon
driver.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wonder just
Yeah.
about what drew you to Cambodia, and how your experience was changed about what you kind of came to write about, or what your initial thoughts were, what the trip was going to be like.
Well, I initially was writing about it in the context of some questions that Aristotle asks about our relationship to tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about, and this is often in philosophy just called the paradox of tragedy. And a
Yeah.
lot of other philosophers have written about it, but it sort of begins with Aristotle, who's talking about, going to, the theater and watching Oedipus with your time off. Like,
Sure,
why
sure.
on earth would we ever want to spend our leisure time
Hmm.
watching, tremendous
Final Destination
tragedy?
or whatever, right?
Yeah, violence, the worst possible things we can imagine happening to other bodies. Like, why is that become a source of pleasure and a rich, fertile soil for so much artwork
Hmm.
to emerge from? And he has a couple answers to this. One is simple. He says humans gotta know. Humans want to know stuff. Like, that's what it is to be human. We must know. And we don't just want to know happy things, we want to know all the things. So he says we have a desire to look upon even the vilest creatures in death, and or that sort of innate desire to crane your neck at the car crash that you're passing.
Mm-hmm.
Or the existence of the 84 Saw movies or whatever, however many of those
I think
movies
it's
that
86
people
now.
make.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what's that all about?
Sure.
It's about humans wanting to know things. Like, we just have to know, and we don't really have to put any moral judgment on that. We can just accept that human nature is uniquely driven by knowledge acquisition. So we want to know about death, and we want to know about suffering, and we want to know about genocide. And so that's one of his answers. But then the other answer that he has is, if we can look at these things in safe contexts, like the theater or a novel
Hmm.
or music or horror films, then we can experience a healthy set of emotions and put those healthy set of emotions in the right place. So the emotions that he specifically names are pity and fear, and that we can have, and this is a term that he uses in the context that we now use it for the first time, comes from Aristotle, which is we can have catharsis. So at that time, catharsis was literally referring to the purging of wounds. It was a
Right.
medical term. And he was using it in a metaphor that now we use this metaphor all the time, a
Mhm.
cathartic experience, one that makes us purge instead of the, pus from a literal wound,
Hmm.
the negative emotions in our hearts. We can cry, and we can feel pity and fear, but we feel it for Oedipus, a fictional character, or we feel it for Mr. Saw victim or whatever, a fictional, a well-paid actor, I hope.
Yes.
So this is the appropriate place to put these negative emotions, because the other option is to purge pity and fear onto my child or onto a stranger in the street. And those are less appropriate places to put negative emotions. So he thinks that these can be, our desire for tragic circumstances, to understand them and be surrounded by them, have actual positive outcomes. And so other philosophers have written about, he writes about this in just in the theater and in poetry. Other people have written, Schopenhauer writes about this and, talking about sad music. My mentor, Noel Carroll, writes about this in horror films, in a really seminal and excellent book about why we watch horror. And I wanted to write about it in what was becoming a much more popular thing, which was dark tourism. So I was just sort of jumping onto this lineage of philosophers sort of exploring the paradox of tragedy, but in different contexts, and saying, what's new about this context? What can it teach us about the paradox of tragedy? I think that, I went to Cambodia because a lot of Cambodia's GDP comes from mostly white Western tourists coming to look at the absolute, one of the most horrifying genocides in modern history. And they built a lot of infrastructure and roads to help people go look at these things. And I was very curious about how a country explains its own pain to other people and to foreigners that are coming in to experience it. And that was the project. And I still think there's a lot of value in that project. I think the project sort of went in, to the side, in part because I was coming at it as though I could be an impartial observer, which of course you can't be. So I had some of the wrong framework for really exploring these questions, but that framework works in the context of Easy Beauty, because Cambodia becomes a place in which I find sort of the worst parts of myself and my own ability to use problematic assumptions about tragedy or other people's lives, or to reduce other people's lives. Like, I find my own ability to do that to others. And that becomes a really important part of the book, because the book is often about other people writing their negative narratives onto me. But something that's so crucial is that there's nothing I'm calling out in someone else that I can't also call out in myself. Like, I'm a human just like anyone else. So I'm capable of using really negative narratives to dehumanize others. And it is equally unacceptable when I do it. And the book is intentionally very relational in that way. It doesn't say I'm some sort of protected special human that isn't capable of hurting other people. No, I'm profoundly capable of it. And I too want, as I ask other people to see me as more whole, I too need to ask myself to be better about the same things. And Cambodia becomes a place in which I see the full cruelty that I too am capable of expressing, I guess.
There's so much there. I mean, the idea that that your driver, when he's like, well, it just used to be, the killing fields that now are tourist place, like they just used to be fields that, buttressed up against, I don't know, a tire shop or a restaurant. Now they're, these multinational companies came in and they've, commodified it and made it financial. And there's just so much there about capitalism and kind of like the perfect experience. I was just so struck by even like, you and the other visitors seeing what you saw, and then it's like, well, I also have to eat. And you go and there's a beautiful like garden area and you eat a sandwich. It's just like
Oh yeah, you could get like ice cream sandwiches literally
right. There was like a guy with a
like
cart or something like that,
towers
right?
of
Yeah.
skulls. Yeah,
Yeah. And the fact that your driver, I'm sorry, tell me his name.
Chetra.
Chetra, he was young enough that he didn't go through what happened with the killing fields, but traumas and generational traumas. And I think of students I've had who come from Cambodian parents, and how do you explain to the next generation and just the horrible things men have done to each other. there's an incredible scene or scenes with at the Sundance Festival, right?
Mhm.
The movie festival. And how do you pronounce it? Is it Linkledge?
Peter Dinklage.
Peter. Okay, right. The famous.
Dinklage.
Oh, okay. Pardon me. The famous actor, and meeting him and all the conditions surrounding that, and some of the bad and some of the good experiences you went through. The last part of the book is mainly about another trip, and it's to Miami. And it's it's not necessarily like action packed. I mean, it's like at a hotel and the family, and have such respect for your mom. I mean, my mom's a first and second grade teacher. I love your mom was a third grade teacher,
Yeah.
but just really kind of in so many ways putting things into context. You talk about the book takes place over 18 months. It's a
Mhm.
pretty short term, but you and your mom were really able to look back at things, and she contextualizes your father, and
Yeah.
you ask her questions and she tells you things, and you learn so much. I wonder why you chose to end it there, and it worked. It worked. It worked. It's so successful. Ending with not Rome or Milan or the Beyonce concert or a crazy chaotic conversation in one of the bars, but more again with the coffee pot
Mhm.
and time with your family
Yeah.
and your mother and such.
Well, I mean, part of it is, the book is mapped on structurally to a quest narrative. And a quest
Mm-hmm.
narrative is one in which a hero leaves home and
Mm-hmm.
seeks treasure of some sort. But quest narratives don't end until the hero returns home with new knowledge. So part of the decision making is well, that's authentically what happened, but then the other part is if I'm in a dialogue with craft and I'm thinking about really crafting this as a true, work outside of just details of my life, how does it map onto a quest narrative? So it's like I could have ended it at the Beyonce concert on this high note of great realization and joy, but I think it's actually really important to see how someone tries, even though, I don't end the book in like some place of like, oh, I've got it all figured out, but
Right.
I do end it in a place of, well, I'm trying to bring this home to
Mm-hmm.
specifically to my son. And my also in the quest narrative is the hero always encounters mentors that guide them. And there's no greater mentor in the book than my mother. And I think in a way you could say like Beyonce is sort of one of those mentors and Federer is like a mentor. And,
Mm-hmm.
there's monsters in the book and there's obstacles and so, and there a lot of those monsters and obstacles are actually me. Sometimes they're other people, but they're mostly me. But my mother is like, she's the ultimate mentor in the book. She's the Gandalf or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she's the hero of the book. And that's, the scene where we're on the beach in Miami and she sort of recontextualizes not just my father but but really her way of seeing me. Because I throughout the book keep referencing this idea that maybe my father wouldn't have left if I hadn't been disabled, and maybe my mother felt so much pressure or fear about my body and being the mother of a disabled child, and I was born in Bangkok away from our family. So to be yeah on the to be almost totally alone in Thailand and then later in Nepal. And I just thought, well, she must have been terrified. This must have been a horrible traumatic experience for her and maybe my dad too. And that's why my dad, it's like I'd held on to my own terrible narratives, which is
Yeah.
a running theme in this book very intentionally. And my mom in that moment in Miami just shifts those things so powerfully and really allows for a lot of this new knowledge that I bring home to my family to actually exist. So much of this sort of thing I'm searching for, deeply, deeply searching for, I don't find it in Rome. I don't find it in Cambodia. I don't find it in California. I find it just with my mother, in
Mm-hmm.
conversation with my mother.
Yeah.
And then the book ends with me trying to bring that to my own son. So yeah, that just felt like narratively and authentically the right
Mm-hmm.
arc for the book.
two beautiful scenes, beautiful in their own way. I love when your mom is pointing out how many nails needed to be done for the boardwalk. Right?
Uh-huh.
She's like, hey, someone had to have done that, right? We're enjoying ourselves, but there's a beauty there in the architecture and the process. And I love when your son is just so blown away by the magic trick. I also love when he's like being so cynical and like
Yeah.
saying like, that's that trick is not really, good. This is how he did it or she did it, blah, blah, blah. That
Yeah.
was so cool. The last question for you is, you talked about catharsis. I mean, you wrote about Order Ramsey. Did I get the name correct?
Ramsey Orta is his name.
Ramsey Orta, excuse me, who was the one who filmed, the police murder of Eric Garner, and
Yeah.
he's selling little Lucy cigarettes for, and he ends up losing his life, and I Can't Breathe, and the whole movement that came from that, but
Mm-hmm.
just all the ways that Ramsey himself was harassed and all that. I mean, and then of course writing and excavating your life. These are deep, troublesome. Going to Cambodia and the 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 genocide there. How do you keep yourself happy? How do you keep yourself calm? How do you not let that drag you down? Or maybe that's not even the right question. But how do you deal with such hugely tragic in some cases
Mm-hmm.
situations that you write about?
Yeah, I mean, both the book and that, the article that you're referring to at Ramsey Order, which I worked on for a year. I went to visit him in various correctional facilities for a year. I mean, that very emotionally taxing,
Yeah.
difficult things. Um, Several moments in which I wanted to quit both
Mm,
things or felt
mm.
deeply overwhelmed or fearful. And yeah, lots of crying someday, so like there, I don't think there's any way of like avoiding the difficulty of it, and I don't think there's any magic bullet for staying. I don't think one should stay happy through all these things. I think one should feel the full weight of the emotions of these experiences, whether it's going really far externally into the life of another person and the social context that has created some real tragedy. In the case of the Ramsey Orta article, or going very deeply into oneself, into some of the most sensitive, painful moments that have shaped me. I will say that I was raised by who myself and my friend always joke about this, that my mother's the queen of perspective.
Mhm.
And it's true. She's just unbelievably gifted at saying a thing that will remind you, like to keep a great perspective. So it could be something as small as me having a really painful writing day and feeling really lost and upset about, whatever thing I'm doing, and her being like, well, this is what you said you always wanted. Like,
Uh-huh.
or like, this is the dream. So you gotta write it. Or this is what, this would be a dream for other people, or this is like a bucket list thing.
Mm,
So it's sort of insulting to, it's not that she doesn't want me to have those emotions or that she's trying
yeah.
to shut them down. You can have those, you can cry and you can feel pain and suffering. You can even want to quit. But at the end of the day, it's important to take a step back and be like, this was important to you and you're going to do it. And nobody has promised you that it was going to be fun and easy all the way through.
Mm.
So you've got to ride through it. And she throughout my entire life has been sort of a genius in this regard, almost obnoxiously so, because it's just like, God, she's right again.
Uh,
So I think that I have been given a tremendous amount of resources from her in terms of um, finding a way to see the bigger picture
yeah.
at the end of the day. So
Mm.
that keeps me pretty happy, actually.
So you're on a roll with these nominations. So much success, so much well-deserved success. You really
Thank
put
you.
yourself into the work in so many different ways. Where, tell us what's coming up if you want, where to find you online. I don't know if you have any book tours or appearances,
Yeah. Well,
social media.
I mean, I'm on Instagram mainly. Just my whole name, Chloé Cooper Jones. And yeah, I'm doing a really exciting event in Bentonville, Arkansas, of all
Hmm.
places,
Okay.
at a great bookstore called Two Friends, on July 28th. So I'm really excited about that. I did a paperback tour, but had to cancel a few dates because my mom got sick. And so now I'm kind of making up some of those dates, which is so fun because my mom's doing so much better. So I can do it with
Yes. All
a lot of
right.
joy. And while I'm in I'm specifically going to Bentonville and partnering with this other artist who his name is Matty Davis, Matty, Matty Davis, but he's a performance artist and a dancer and
Oh,
choreographer, and he has a museum commission there. And so he's doing this incredible dance performance, and I did some work for that, and he's gonna come be part of this book event. And so
hmm.
there's like this big cultural cool, exciting stuff that's happening in Bentonville, Arkansas. So if anybody's
Cool.
listening who's in the Midwest, I hope
Yeah.
you'll come and see either my book event on the 28th or Maddie Davis's performance at the Momentary in the first week of August, 4th, 5th, and
Nice.
6th of August.
Is
So
there a tie into Walmart? Isn't that Walmart's head? I
we're
feel
not
like that's
tied
their
to
world
Walmart.
head. I feel like that's their world headquarters. I might be wrong. Maybe it's
That
Ben.
is where that is what
Okay.
Bentonville is famous for. Yeah,
Okay.
there's a
All
lot of
right.
Walmart money in that
Now
town.
they're famous for performance art. It's not going to be like another showing of like the Marina Abramovich one, is it? Because that scared the heck out of me. Wait, the one you
Yeah,
wrote
no,
about the book. Okay, good.
no, although I do think this performance is yeah, is very intense and cool, but no, not
Nice.
not
Nice.
another Rhythm Zero. But no, there's Crystal Bridges is like a great museum that's there in the Momentary.
Mm.
So Bentonville has some really cool stuff, and I can't wait to go. I'm really excited about it.
Well, thanks so much. I just love talking to people who are so creative, so much about art and muses and philosophy, and obviously just really deep thinkers. And it's one thing to be a deep thinker, but you're able to put it into terms that us laymen and women can understand. So thank you so much for your time and continue good luck with your writing.
Thank you so much. It's so lovely to talk to you.
Such a pleasure. Thank you.